In this video, I'll show you how I ran the cabling for the Starlink Mini on a 2016 Roadtrek Zion. Now you can see here, I have both power cable and the Ethernet cable because I'm not working with the internal Wi-Fi on the Starlink Mini. With the van, I prefer to use an external router with the Starlink Mini. One of the big reasons is the Wi-Fi strength. The Starlink Mini has, I believe, Wi-Fi 5, and most routers these days are Wi-Fi 6 or even 7. That's a big difference when it comes to signal strength, especially if I have to relocate the dish somewhere else to get a better view of the sky. It will be harder to get a solid Wi-Fi connection when working inside my van. Now, why did they use Wi-Fi 5? I can only speculate. I'm guessing because it is kind of a weaker Wi-Fi spec. Maybe it was for power consumption reasons. That's just a guess. I don't know. But I have noticed that when I'm on video calls, everything does seem to run a lot smoother. I have less packet loss when using an external router. Now, external routers also have a lot more security features. The Wi-Fi routing features that are built in the Starlink Mini, they're pretty limited. They're very basic. Now, I will reset the Starlink Mini back if I'm using a different vehicle, or let's say I want to take it backpacking. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Starlink Mini, if you want to use an external router, you just can't plug in an Ethernet cable. You're supposed to put the dish into bypass mode, which you do on the app. Now, once you put into bypass mode, you have to reset the dish to, if you want to go back and use the internal Wi-Fi. It's not a switch you can turn on and off. You can just turn it. You can turn bypass on, but you can't turn it off without doing a full reset, which means you need to reset like your Wi-Fi network name, password, everything. I hope on future updates or a version 2 of the Starlink Mini, they actually resolve this. They make it so it's literally just a switch to turn it on and off without having to do a reset all the time. That would be really, really nice. You can see that I'm using RV sealant tape to secure the cabling on top of the van. I'm always concerned about branches or some other debris snagging the cabling. So it's running between the fan and the solar panels, then alongside the solar panels, right to the end of the van. Well, this isn't my sexiest installation ever, but I'm just showing you how I'm running the cabling down the side of the door jamb, and I'm using the tape to keep it out of the way so it doesn't pinch. I haven't had any pinching issues whatsoever. So when I get down here, you see that there is this bracket in place right here already. That was used to support the wiring that comes from the back door and give it a secure access inside the coach. So I did have to cut into this a little bit to get the Ethernet cable and the power cable to fit. Then once I did, that helped me reroute the cabling to the inside. And I'm going to hop inside the van and talk about the setup a little more. After I ran the cable through the van, I took this little piece off right here. It only had 2 screws on this end. There weren't any screws inside of here. All right, it just tucks in back there. I did eventually have to cut a little notch right through here so the Ethernet and power cable could fit through. Also, I tucked all my extra cabling inside of here. All the way down through here, there's a big empty space. If you don't have one of these, I highly suggest getting one. Now, this is a Borescope. Sometimes you'll hear people call these endoscopes, which functionally, they're the same thing. Endoscopes are more medical tools. Anything that's more for, like, you know, around the house, working on the vehicle like this is referred to as a Borescope. It's got a little snake hose cable thing with a camera on the end of it and a video screen. Now, let me power this on so you can see it in action. Where's the power? There we go. All right, see, as I look around, it's got a little light on the front. I can't even begin to explain to you how awesome these things are to have. So before I tucked all the cabling inside that back section of my van, I stuck this in there and looked around to make sure that I wasn't going to knock anything loose or damage anything. And I was able to verify that everything was empty. I also use this for cable installation elsewhere in the van and basically for a lot of household use cases. These things are amazing. Before you start jamming anything into a tight space that you can't see into, I do suggest getting these. You can get these for around $100, $120-ish on Amazon, and it can probably save you hundreds of dollars in potential mistakes. And they're just kind of cool to play with, to be completely honest. I would then run the cabling up into here. Now I wanted to run it up into here, have it totally invisible. I haven't been able to yet. So for now, there's a little piece of it come through right here that's slightly visible. Overall, it hasn't snagged on anyone or anything yet, so I'm not really worried about it. I then kept the cabling running all under the trim up to here, where it comes out, and I have it running into a grommet right here. Ignore all this cabling. We'll talk about this in a minute. So I just talked about that hole that I drilled into the closet. Now there's already one that existed way over here for the television. All right, this is the power cable for the television. And it all goes into the little closet space, which if I open that up, have a look. Now this is where the TV came through. Now the one that I drilled is gonna be back there a ways, almost impossible to see. But all the cables run up. And if you look closely, you'll see they're running into a hole up there. Now, the coach, the van came with that drilled in. That runs into this little cubby right here. Let me get my flashlight so you can see it. All right. So everything comes in right there. Now, this came with a DVD Blu-ray player, which I swapped out for an Atari. I also keep the Fire Stick up here. And the cabling would then run up into my little closet here for my clothes. And I had everything plugged in right here. The Starlink, the router, television, Fire Stick, everything. However, I ran into a problem with that. Now the first trip I did that was longer than a weekend. I went out to Trona Pinnacles by Death Valley. And I first tried running everything off the coach battery. Now this is a 2016. It only has one battery in it. And what I noticed was by the time I got to mid-afternoon, because I was working remotely, I would have to start up the van. Like my battery would be getting pretty low. I'd usually have to run the van 2 to 3 times a day. And what I've learned since then, what works for me, now this may not work for everyone. For me, it's a better use of power distribution if I just use the van's battery to power the refrigerator, the fans, and the lights, and that's it. Sometimes the solar is enough, the solar panels on the van are enough to support that. And then I use my BLUETTI and my Jackery for everything else, and I have solar panels set up outside to keep those charged. When I did that, then everything was well balanced. So for me, for this setup, that's what works best. Again, other people are gonna have different use cases because not everyone has the same build. What I ended up doing was drilling a hole through the cubby. I ran my cabling down through here. I installed this little power strip right here. It's got 2 regular 3-prong outlets, a USB-A and a USB-C. I plug my Starlink Mini into this. This right here is the power for my router, and this is the power for either the Atari or the Fire Stick. Now this plugs into extension cable that runs back up into the top and plugs into the coach. Now let's talk about my router installation. So here's the microwave, kitchen, bed, you get the layout, all right? The router is right here. I drilled a hole to run the power and the Ethernet cable behind the microwave. Now this is where the Borescope also came in really handy. That runs through this hole that already existed for the microwave power cable. So here is the power and Ethernet, and they're just running out to the other holes that I drilled. So getting back to this, the reasoning is when I'm camping out for longer than a day, I will unplug from here, and then I'll just run the power cable right down here to my BLUETTI AC 180. And then I'll have solar panels outside if I'm staying for a long period of time keeping this charged. Otherwise, I'll have this plugged in, trickle charging it while driving down the road. And that is how I use the Starlink Mini in my Roadtrek Zion. Now, this probably won't work for everyone. I'm sure everyone is going to have their own opinions, their own workflow, their own setup that works for them. I'm just showing you what's worked for me. Hopefully someone out there can actually benefit from this information. Well, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.